Guys, what's going on and welcome back to the channel. So if you guys remember, all the way back at the very beginning of this channel, two of the very first videos that I did were kayak modification videos. The first one was a seat raise modification on my Ascend 12T, and the second video was the install of my T18 Water Snake ASP trolling motor. Since then, those videos have become super popular and they've worked their way all the way up to the top of the search results for their respective keywords, which is super awesome and I appreciate it so much. But obviously that shows that you guys are interested in these kayak modification videos and you're finding them to be helpful and useful. So we're gonna do another one of those videos today. Just the other day, I got something super cool in the mail, and this is the YakAttack Leverloc Anchor Trolley system. These anchor trolley systems are super easy to install, and even more important, they're super easy to use. Simply throw your anchor out, and then you can use the rope that runs down the side of the kayak to adjust the position on your kayak from the bow all the way to the stern, just to get that perfect angle into the wind or the current. You can face into the wind, you can face against the wind, you can even be sideways to the wind. It doesn't matter, any of those angles are now possible, and if the wind or the current happens to change, you can simply pull that rope and move the anchor along the side of your kayak to adjust for it and stay facing that perfect fishing hole, allowing you to make that perfect cast and get your fish. Alright guys, let's go ahead and rip this packaging open and get into this install. Alright, so we've got all kind of components here that we're going to need to install this anchor trolley system. So this is the first and most obvious one, and this is going to be your actual anchor line. This is what you're going to use to adjust that anchor and move it up and down along the side of your kayak. The next component to the system is going to be this, which is what YakAttack calls the stealth trolley. Basically what this is the wheel that's going to go on the side of the kayak, and it's going to allow that cable to move back and forth through it. The nice thing about these is because this wheel is locked in there, this isn't going to be bouncing up and down on the side of the kayak if it were only attached to one point like you see on some other types of pulleys. Now this is the assembled base and lever lock system. This is the component that's going to go in the middle of the kayak within reach of your hand, and this is actually, if you look at the back, it's got this little channel in here. That's where your line is going to go through, and then you can actually lock it down with this lever, so as the kayak moves back and forth in the current or the wind, you're not going to have that line slipping through here and moving the position of your anchor. Now the next component is going to actually be your ring. This is going to go into this little channel on the bottom, and that's actually what you're going to be able to use to move that anchor back and forth on that cable. We'll show you that in a few minutes. And then finally, the last component of this system is going to be this, and this is called the pad hook. Basically all this is it's a guide. You can see that there's a little channel here, and that's just going to guide that rope through it to make sure that that rope is going towards the pulley on the front and the back of your kayak. And then of course we have our included mounting hardware from YakAttack. And obviously for this install, we're going to need a power drill so we can drill some holes in the side of the boat to mount this hardware to it. Now the first, and actually one of the most important things that we need to do in this install, is figure out which side of the kayak we're going to put this anchor trolley system on. And this is an important decision because if you put it on the wrong side and you decide that you want to change it over later, you can, but you're going to have holes in the opposite side of your kayak that you're now going to need to seal to prevent water from getting into the hole. So just to avoid that whole mess, let's pick the correct side of the kayak the first time. Now in my particular case, I'm choosing to mount my anchor trolley system on the right side of the hull, and there's a couple reasons that I'm doing that. The first and the major reason is that on the left side of my hull I actually have fly rod holders that I've built for the kayak, and that's also where my paddle goes. So I don't want to have to be reaching over my paddle or over my fly rods and potentially knock them off into the water while I'm trying to adjust this anchor trolley system. The second reason, and maybe one of the most obvious, that I want my anchor to be on the right side of my hull is because I'm right-handed. So it's just going to be that much easier and feel that much more natural moving that anchor on my right side. And the third and final reason that I want my anchor to be on the right side is because I've already installed a cleat right over here to tie off my excess anchor rope. I really don't want to have to move that cleat and make more holes on the opposite side of the kayak, so we're just going to go right over here on the right-hand side. So the very first thing that we need to do when installing this anchor trolley system is determine on the front and the back of the boat where our pulleys are going to go. Now, a lot of people like to mount them up here on this top part, which is good because you want them to be as far above the water line as possible. But on my particular boat, because of where I actually have my side handles mounted, which is on this upper beveled part, I'm not going to be able to run my anchor trolley there, so it is going to have to be down on this lower part. But for me, that's not going to be too much of a problem because the water level only really comes up to about right here on the stern of the boat, and even less on the front. So mounting this right here is going to be good. Now, the other thing to consider is you want as much forward and backwards movement of this anchor trolley system as possible. That way you can move the anchor all the way to the stern or all the way to the front of the bow and have the most control over how you are facing into the wind or the current. So for my particular case, I'm going to mount my rear pulley as far back as I possibly can, which is going to be right here. On some boats, this might be a little bit more difficult depending on how the bow and the stern of your boat is shaped, so it's really going to be up to you on where you mount these pulleys. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put this pulley on here now that I've decided where I want it to go, and I'm going to go ahead and make just a little mark with my drill bit. Now, YakAttack recommends for the thread size you use a 1/8 inch drill bit. You just want to make sure that you don't go much bigger than that because otherwise the threads on the screws aren't going to have enough to grab onto in the hole there. So now that I've got that mark made, I'm going to go ahead and just drill this out and clean the hole up just a little bit. It's an important thing to note that YakAttack includes long and short screws in this kit, so you have to know which ones to use for each particular component. For these pulleys that are included, we're going to use one long and one short, the long one going through the middle of the pulley and the short going through the back of the pulley. Now, I've only made one of the holes for this pulley so far because I want to make sure that we get it in the exact perfect position. So I'm going to go ahead and put that short screw through the rear part of the pulley because that's the first hole we drilled. I'm going to get it lined up and take my drill and just very carefully start threading that screw into the hole of the boat. Now, it's recommended that you use a hand screwdriver for this because you don't want to run this too hard and strip the plastic threading out of your hole. So I'm just going to be very, very careful with this drill when I kind of bring this in here, just like that, and I'm going to stop before I actually get it fully tightened down, and I'm going to finish tightening it by hand. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do before I officially tighten that bolt down is I'm going to drill the second hole on this pulley now that I have it lined up and know exactly where it's going to need to be. Now, I prefer doing this over just marking the holes with a Sharpie or a pencil or something like that and then drilling them out because I find this to just be a little bit more accurate. And now we can go ahead and get that second screw started. Alright, let's go ahead and tighten those down all the way by hand, and I'm going to use a really, really small screwdriver. You can use whatever you want. I just prefer to use these small ones because I can't physically get too much torque on these small handles as opposed to one of those big screwdrivers where you can just grip the whole thing. So it's just kind of a safety for myself so I don't over tighten these and strip the plastic of the hole and have to move this pulley to a different position. Alright, so now that we've got that tightened down, we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the front of the boat. So the front of the boat's going to be exactly the same as the rear, so we're just going to figure out where we want that pulley to go. In my particular case, I'm going to go as far forward as I possibly can, which on this boat is actually really easy. I can go all the way to the bow just like that. So now that I know where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and get that hole drilled. We're going to go ahead and pull that pulley up and tighten that just a little more. And there we go. Alright, now we can take one of our long bolts and drive it into that second hole, and then once again we're going to use a screwdriver and finish tightening these by hand. Alright, and there we go, and that's nice and secure in there now. Alright, Alright, so what we need to do now is determine where we're actually going to put the lever lock on this boat. Now obviously we're going to do this in relation to where our seat is, because we need to be able to reach this lever lock while we're out on the water without struggling too much. Now another important thing to note is you want this to be able to slide into there just like that and just freely hang and be able to be pulled out and put back in. So if you put this on an upper bevel like this on some kayaks, this is just going to fall right out. You're not going to be able to lock it in there. So this actually works out really well for me anyway because of where I put my pulleys on this boat, which is below that bevel line. So we're just going to go ahead and mount that lever lock system there, and then that can pop right up and freely hang and still be pulled out and easily accessed from the seat. So we're going to do this the same way that we did the other ones, and I'm going to go ahead and just drill one of these holes out where I want this to go, which is probably going to be about right here. Alright, and for the lever lock part here, we're going to use the last two of the long bolts that YakAttack has included. So I'm going to go ahead and put one of those into there and get it lined up, and we're going to go ahead and just get that screw started. Get this lined up so it's nice and parallel with the kayak, and then we can go ahead and drill our second hole. And of course, tighten it by hand. All right, and there we go. So we've got our lever lock mounted on the boat. So now is the really cool part of this build. What we're gonna need to do is feed our paracord through our ring, and we're going to tie a double overhand knot to secure it. Now it's important to note that you're going to want the knot to be on this side so it can sink into that nice little hole that they have there and sit flush with the ring. So go ahead and pull your end through. We're going to tie just a very simple overhand knot all the way at the end of the line, just so we don't waste a large amount, and go ahead and pull that through, and it should sit relatively nice in that little groove there. Now I'm going to wait till the end of the video to trim this tag end off, because if I have to adjust something and pull this knot out, I don't want to have to try to feed this back through the ring with the end being all frayed up. So we're just going to leave it as is for now. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our ring, and we're just going to insert it right into there just like that. That way it's not only out of our way, but it's held in the correct position that it's going to be in when it's actually in use on the kayak. That way we can go ahead and take our cord and feed it through the pulley system, and then we'll tie it off on this other end. So now we're going to pull our cord out all the way to the end, get any knots out, find the end. Remember guys, you got 35 feet of cord here, so it might take a minute. Found it. And once you have the end of that cord and you're positive that there's no loops or anything in it, go ahead and come up through the bottom of the front pulley first, and then we're going to pull this all the way through until it's tight against the hull of the boat, just like that. Alright, and then after we've gone through the front pulley, we're going to run this through the little channel on the anchor lock system. And it's an important thing to note, make sure your lever lock is actually in the unlocked position so you can easily feed this thing through without it having any holdups or anything like that. If you're having any trouble, they've actually put some little holes on the front here so you can stick something in there and kind of grab onto that paracord and just kind of help it along through the hole out the other side, just like that. All right, and then go ahead and pull that paracord all the way through until it's nice and tight. All right, and then we're gonna go to the back pulley, and we're gonna run this from the top down through the back pulley and pull it all the way through. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take that paracord and we're going to run it through this hole over here, just like that. I'll lock this back in there just to make it easy on myself, and we're going to pull that paracord all the way through, just like that. Now what I'm going to do here is pull this paracord as tight as I can without dislodging our ring, and I'm going to take off the tag end, but I'm going to leave quite a bit of tag end on here for us to work with. I'm probably going to leave about a foot. And we'll go ahead and just clip that off just like that. Now, keeping it pulled nice and tight, I'm going to make a knot, maybe a couple of inches down from where that ring is. We'll make that knot, and when you let go, it should loosen up quite a bit, and that's what we want. When this thing gets wet, the first couple of times, it's going to expand and contract, so you're not really going to know how tight it's actually going to be when you first install this on the kayak and it's still dry. So that's why we're going to leave this tag end on there. That way, as it expands and contracts and takes its final form, we can make adjustments in that knot if we need to. Now at this point, this line should be nice and tight so it's not just drooping down on the side of the kayak, but you should still be able to take this ring and pull it back and forth along the kayak. And that's what you want, because that's what's going to allow you to adjust where your anchor is. Alright, so the final step of our anchor trolley install is going to be figuring out where to put the line guides. Basically all these do is they guide the rope and prevent it from moving up or sliding down into the water or something like that. And we have two of these, one for the stern and one for the bow. So the first thing is we need to determine where these are going to be best suited on the boat. So looking at my particular boat, on the stern here, this is where it's the most curved and where I'm most likely to have this slipping up over the top of the bevel or something like that. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the stern line guide right here, just like that. And that's gonna keep this right below the bevel, running right across here, right where I want it. And it's gonna keep it from sliding up over the top of the bevel or drooping down into the water. Alright, so we're gonna tighten that down just like that. And it's important to note that when you install these line guides, you need to have the part of the cleat that's hanging open on the bottom, because when your ring comes through here, it needs to be able to slide through the bottom part like that if you are gonna have it go all the way to the back of the front of your kayak. Go ahead and install that second screw. And there we go. All right, and we're gonna do the same thing up here on the front of the boat. So make sure you've got that rope captured in that little channel there. And then you can go ahead and get that first screw almost tightened down. And then take your second one. We'll go ahead and drive that in. Just like that. And take our screwdriver, we'll get that tightened down. And now we are all set. Now one more important thing to note about why you want those line guides to be upside down so this ring can slide through them all the way to the forward and the back part of the kayak is that you want to make sure that you have your rope actually tied coming through the back of this ring. That way when it goes through those little rings on the front and the back of the kayak, this is flush against the boat. If you have it flipped the other direction, this is just going to run into those rings and it's not going to want to slide through there. And then one final step that we're gonna do, like I said, I'm gonna leave most of this tag end so I can adjust this thing later, but I'm gonna take a little bit off, leaving probably about 5 to 6 inches. That way it's just not too excessive while I'm trying to paddle this thing. And I'm gonna take a lighter and just kind of singe those end pieces. Get them melted down, and that way they don't fray. Guys, that's pretty much all there is to installing the YakAttack Leverloc Anchor Trolley system on your kayak. You can put the system on any kayak out there and it's going to give you improved control over how you can position your boat into the wind or the current. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this is something that's going to be super helpful to those of you who are heavy into kayak fishing, who fish every single day, even when it's windy out there. Maybe you're out in the ocean, maybe you're in the lake. It's a nice gusty day and the wind is constantly changing. This is going to give you full control over the way that your boat is pointing into or against the wind. And this is also going to be super helpful for those of you who are into fishing streams and rivers that have light current. You can anchor yourself down and position it so you're facing downstream, upstream, literally whatever you want. This is such an awesome system. You can pick these up for about $30. I ordered mine off of Amazon to avoid shipping costs, but obviously you can get these from YakAttack or pretty much any other retailer like Sportsman's Warehouse, Cabela's, pretty much any of those that sells YakAttack kayak equipment. Unfortunately, YakAttack doesn't include very good instructions, in my own personal opinion, with this kit on how to actually install this on the boat. They do include some paper instructions, but it doesn't have any visuals on it. So I hope that you guys found this helpful and useful. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you guys are interested in checking out my seat raise modification on the Ascend 12T kayak, you can check out that video up here in the corner. And if you guys are interested in checking out some fishing content from my channel, check out my latest fishing video down here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.